You know, I love to talk about movies like these. It's not every day that you get a movie that is so absurdly bad that it transcends itself and its quality to become an entertaining spectacle. There's been The Happening, there's been Dracula 3000, there's been Silent Night, Deadly Night and its sequel. All movies I've absolutely loved talking about, because they've got such an amazing aura behind them that carries them throughout their runtimes. But today, I've got something a little more special for you all. Just when I thought I was done talking about this monster, after basically making a quasi-documentary on the thing, here I am to talk about it once more. As I explained in my quasi-documentary, the franchise has plenty of ups and plenty of downs throughout the many years that it's been around. With a whopping 32 features under its belt, it's probably no surprise that some of those features didn't get made with quite the same love and care as the others. Sure, there are plenty of films from the Showa period I could point to, since they're all spectacular in their own rights, but there's one that stood out to me so much that as soon as I saw it, I just knew I had to talk about it. So the film I want to present to you all today is a film that has gained a cult status, and has made numerous fans through its absurdity and extremely troubled production. It manages to simultaneously be the best the franchise has to present in terms of entertainment, and the worst the franchise has to present in quality. Since it is the holiday season, I decided I would give to you all the gift that is the 13th installment in the Godzilla franchise, Godzilla vs. Megalon. So, what's it about? So I know you're probably thinking that I've built this up extremely high, comparing it to other cult classics that people have grown to love. Well, I'm not exaggerating when I say you have never seen anything like this before. Let me go ahead and talk about the plot of this movie, so you can really get a grasp of what it is and what we're dealing with here. And by the way, I highly encourage you to look for this movie and watch it after this video. I'm going to be explaining some things about the movie's background and production that might lead to a more interesting watch. And even still, words cannot describe the absolute insanity that this film holds in its short 80-minute runtime. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what's this movie about? What's the central conflict? What the hell is going on here? Well, keeping in line with the last few Godzilla films, specifically Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster and Godzilla vs. Gigan, this entry into the franchise presents a message of the potential harm of underground nuclear testing that was being pretty heavily protested back at the time. So surprisingly, this film does kind of carry some form of important message that it tries to convey for the first 10 minutes or so. We get shown what happens when the monsters of Monster Island decide to throw a rave. Or possibly an earthquake from the nuclear testing, I'm not too sure. We're also introduced to... Hold on. Okay. We're also introduced to Goro, Hishori, and Rokuro, I probably butchered those, in this lake place where the underground testing also has an effect. Thanks to that, we're treated to what feels like a 10-minute long segment of Goro and Hishori trying to pull Rokuro out of the water, as it looks like the Earth itself is ending in what might be the most untension-filled scene I've ever seen. So, shit's fucked up, and it awakens a new threat that comes in the form of the Seatopians that are pissed about the nuclear underground experiments going on. They frankly have one of the most wacky designs for anything I've ever seen before, ever. Like, they're people that live beneath the surface of the Earth, and everyone decided that making this guy, the supposed emperor of the Seatopians, should be wearing a toga and a Megalon headband. Not to mention, you've got these BDSM clan members in the background dancing around. This movie was marketed towards kids. But anyway, the Seatopians decide to send two of their agents that proceed to gently tap all of the main characters into unconsciousness in their lab. All except for one that proceeds to chase the agents by car for half a millennia. That is until one of the agents decides to snap fire into existence. But then everyone is back at the lab, and the agents shoot everyone and contact the underground toga-wearing clan members. So the Seatopians decide to awaken Megalon with some sort of BDSM clan member ritual, and it goes up to the surface. So you're probably thinking, wow, that's a lot of stuff to happen in just the span of 24 minutes. Well, you'd be wrong. Two of our protagonists are now in a cargo container, thanks to one of the agents hijacking a truck, and the other is being forced to rework Jet Jaguar for Megalon's attack on the evil above-ground people in Tokyo. Hold on, I'm sorry. Do you even care what I'm talking about right now? It's not really all that interesting, and despite it being pretty hilarious at some points, it really just feels like they're trying to fluff this movie up. Alright, well anyway, at this point, Megalon is already on the attack and kind of saves the two in the container by punching them in midair to collide with the ground at what was probably a human-killing velocity, but you know, it's no big deal. Also, this happens. Insert stock footage army gathering here. Now, considering how many times an army attack on the monsters would have worked on prior Godzilla films, I want you, the viewer, to guess what's gonna happen next. Will A, Megalon defeat the army? Will B, the army defeat Megalon? Or will C, the Seatopians invade and aid Megalon in the destruction of the surface world?
Short dick!
If you guessed A, B, or C, then your expectations for this movie's budget are way too high. Instead, we're treated to stock footage of the army attacking and more stock footage of the army getting their asses handed to them. That's right, it's not even Megalon that's doing the damage. I think this footage is from Mothra vs. Godzilla, and it's not even the first time it's been ripped off either. And all the other damage being done on Tokyo is ripped straight from Ghidorah the three-headed monster. More infamously, in this attack on the army, Megalon starts swiping away at these helicopters in the air with its big drill hand things. Only problem is that when we get an actual shot of the hit, we don't get a glimpse of Megalon's dildo hands. We clearly get a shot of Gigan's big meaty claws from Godzilla vs. Gigan swiping away at these motherfuckers. Should we get even crazier? Because I haven't even mentioned the footage stolen from War of the Gargantuas, Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, and maybe even Laser Blast at this point, but who knows? I'm pretty sure that if I was to splice in random bits of it to the movie, nobody would even notice. But listen, I know what you're all here for, and I won't deprave you of that, so I'm just gonna speed along through the rest of this thing. So after surviving the fall of the century, these guys fly a helicopter up to Jet Jaguar, where they manage to intercept his interception. The last agent then proceeds to get a taste of his own medicine when they fly a toy helicopter into his face that severs all the veins in his face or something, and is mercilessly tapped with a box to death. Brutal stuff, I know. I'm gonna get unmonetized for sure. But now, with all this ridiculous side plot out of the way, I can now formally welcome you all to Kaiju Media 13 on the Kaiju Network! Tonight, we've got a very special main event for you, featuring the likes of two of the baddest monsters that ever stepped into the ring. Introducing first, weighing in at 25,000 metric tons, he is totally not the ripoff of Ultraman, Jet Jaguar! And his opponent, weighing in at 40,000 metric tons, he is the god of the race of toga-wearing clan members, Megalon! So these two just kind of squirm around for a little bit until Gigan shows up, and it helps Megalon in severely handing Jet Jaguar its shiny metal ass. This actually goes on for quite a bit. They're just double teaming this poor robot until Godzilla comes in doing this shit, and helps as much as this goofy looking motherfucker can. Which actually appears to be a lot, because he comes in and wrecks shop for a solid bit. He even attacks Megalon with a tree, kind of like how King Kong did to him 10 movies ago. But since Jet Jaguar is still a useless fucking piece of shit, Megalon and Gigan get the upper hand again. Then you see Megalon has the ability to repeatedly play the same clip of it shooting explosive balls out of its mouth, so it encapsulates Godzilla and Jet Jaguar in a literal ring of fire, until Jet Jaguar just flies both of them out of there with no problem whatsoever, effectively wasting a solid amount of time with tension that built to nothing. Then we basically just get 10 minutes of Jet Jaguar and Godzilla kicking Gigan and Megalon's collective ass, until Gigan decides to get the fuck out of there and leaves Megalon to the mercy of a kung fu lizard and this fucking thing. Unsurprisingly, they just annihilate it by slamming the personless Megalon suit into the ground repeatedly. Then how could we forget about the finishing touch?
Jet Jaguar is picking up his opponent and holding it down. What can Godzilla possibly have in mind? Is he? Oh no. He is. He's breaking out the gravity-defying dropkick. Unbelievable! Let's get instant replay on that glorious maneuver. Just like that, Megalon submits for the match, meeting your winners of the Kaiju Mania 13 main event are Godzilla and Jet Jaguar!
So Megalon retreats by throwing itself into this hole and blowing up. Not too sure what it was planning to do there, but hey. We then finish the movie off with Godzilla and Jet Jaguar shaking hands, Godzilla leaving back to Monster Island, and Jet Jaguar returning to human size and going home to the majestic Jet Jaguar theme song.
Jet Jaguar, yatta de Jaguar.
So I'm sure a few of you are wondering, what in the holy hell went wrong? Well, let me explain in a section I like to call, What Went Wrong With It? Yeah, I'm not very good at making these titles. So yeah, what went wrong with it? Well, despite the several other issues that it had in its production, I feel like it all comes down to one simple thing. You see, this movie was filmed in 2 weeks.
Holy fuck!
So yes, you heard me correctly. This movie was filmed in an astonishing 2 weeks. So let me go ahead and elaborate as to why this was the case, as well as some other reasons why this movie was a production nightmare. So firstly, it's important to talk about the state of the entertainment industry of Japan at the time. You see, the insane kaiju craze of the 1960s that housed the monsters like Godzilla, Gamera, and a metric fuckton of other monsters had slowly run its course and had become exhausted to say the least. Seriously, there are an insane amount of kaiju films that came out around that time. It was basically akin to the Marvel movie domination of today. It started to run its course around the 1970s, which just so happened to be the same time that television had taken over as the dominant entertainment medium of Japan. With the domination of television and the dying of cinema across Japan, turning a profit with a movie became significantly more difficult. So Toho had to cut a lot of corners with this film in specific. So what did they do exactly? Well, they lowered the budget. By a lot. To an extremely low amount. To a dangerously low amount. No, I am not exaggerating. A lot of those costumes in the movie were highly flammable, and as you can see in some of those shots, they did indeed catch fire. As I mentioned earlier, this film was made in 2 weeks to save money on production costs. Everything was done in one take, and there were supposedly no reshoots. Wait, I'm not done yet. The script for this movie was done in literal minutes before the camera started rolling, and it was so poorly constructed that lines for the characters were often made up on the spot. And keep in mind, everything was one take. Which kind of shows in the fact that despite the movie trying to talk about how underground nuclear testing is bad, Megalon and the Seatopians are the ones that are shown off to be the villains and get their asses handed to them. That's right, Godzilla and Jet Jaguar were the villains here. Godzilla, that's no surprise. But Jet Jaguar, why? Just look at its eyes, those evil, soulless eyes that massacred an entire species of people.
But I'm not done yet!
Remember all that stock footage that I made a habit of pointing out? This film's script was actually built around the stock footage. No kidding! They took those many pieces of stock footage and made this story around it. What an absolute fucking mess. Surely with the same people having worked on the 13th Godzilla film, they would have gotten it down by now, right? Well, it's too bad that this crew was full of newcomers hired by Toho, since all their experienced people jumped ship for TV. Even Haruo Nakajima, the person that played Godzilla in all the Godzilla films prior, retired, which is probably why Godzilla seems so absurdly different when compared to its earlier films. Another reason for this different feeling probably has to do with the Tin Can Man himself, Jet Jaguar. See, even though this film might have been built up as a battle between Godzilla and Megalon, Godzilla is much more of a side character, making way for Jet Jaguar to take the spotlight so kids could see this and become interested in a Jet Jaguar line of films. Or so I imagine. Originally, Jet Jaguar was going to be the sole protagonist of the film before Toho realized that this bucket of shit wasn't going to appeal to anyone. So instead, they stuck it under the profitable moniker of Godzilla. Unsurprisingly, with the failure of this film, Jet Jaguar would no longer receive any more film appearances. However, he would make a few televised appearances on a little-known TV show called Godzilla Island. For the few people that do recognize this show, it was that one show where all the monsters were conveyed through action figures. But anyway, let's top this video off in a little section I like to call Conclusion. Alright folks, I hope you all learned the moral of the story when it comes to movies like these, which is, don't blow things up underground? This movie suffered from one of the most troubling productions I think I have ever heard of, and the end result definitely shows that. It goes to show just how important timing is when it comes to production. I doubt that this movie would have been all that much better if it had the proper time, but only 2 weeks to film is just pure lunacy. Seriously, it took me 2 weeks to make this video. How Toho thought this was acceptable, I will never know. They were just that desperate to make a profit that they made a film that kind of looks like a bootleg Godzilla film, especially when you put it up against other Godzilla films from that time, like the stock footage that they used. Oddly enough, the movie turned a pretty good profit here in the US, grossing approximately $5 million in its run being marketed towards children. Which in complete honesty is probably more than it deserves, but hey, who am I to judge? Overall, this movie is actually quite the blast to sit through, even if you're not a big Godzilla fan. I can't imagine there being a world where Godzilla pulling off a gravity-defying dropkick isn't hilarious. This film really goes to show just how important production time, preparation, and a lot of other things that go into making a film are. I have to imagine that being on that set was very difficult due to the circumstances they were put into. They had one chance for every scene and they were making things up as they went. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call a production nightmare. But hey, if you can get your hands on this film, I would highly recommend gathering up some friends and watching this cult classic with some friends for a good time. If you enjoyed this video, why not head over to my newly launched Patreon page. There you can choose to support me in any way you wish, for rewards such as having your name come up on the screen like these fine gentlemen are right now. Or how about an audio commentary track I did for this exact movie a while ago, going into more detail with its troubled production. Either way, I would highly appreciate any support you could offer to help make this YouTube thing a job. Regardless, I hope you all enjoy the holidays, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Morning, morning.